under the ground, and magnetic levitated trains being put in underground. And this is one of these things, along with 10, 15 investigations that had been brought to my doorstep, and I just put it on the back shelf, because it was something was going to take me an awful lot of additional effort, and I just said, well, I'm not going to get into it. Let me just stay away from that. But now that was brought back under my nose, and I got thinking and doing more inquiry in a lot of directions as to what would it take to really scare let's say the elite limited few that have their hands in our pockets, but what would it take to scare them so much that they would start putting multi-million tons of dried foods underground? Why would they be buying all this weapons? What is it that possibly could cause them to have such fear? And then somebody said, passed some information on and said, hey, they're doing this in Russia and China and several other major nations of the world. They're not all doing it as profusely as we are, but they're all doing the same thing. So now I said, oh, wait a minute. And again, this is what brought in back to the front of my mind was this business about Nibiru. So I started studying that from a scientific and an astronomical view, the astronomy of that thing, because the bottom line that finally lit, let's say the light that switched on, is that this had been verified, the planet X being this planet that theoretically is in a long, way far out orbital, elongated orbit that comes back by 3,600 years was what most of the thought was on it, that the orbit was a 3,600-year orbit. And when it comes around, that was what had created, in fact, Noah's flood, the flood that caused most of the globe to be flooded. So I ended up, all of a sudden, I started having to study astronomy and the science of it and get into the history of Nibiru. What was this potentially, is this really something that now may be coming back around? Something that now may be coming back around. And if it is, we're talking really serious problems for the entire globe. But then that also makes sense for 103 is the approximate number of underground facilities in the United States alone. The Russians put out a mandate for themselves, and I believe it was approximately in 2008, 9, 10, around that period of time, that they were going to have 5,000 smaller underground facilities completed by the year 2013. And they do and have done that. They do, for the most part, have completed 5,000 of these smaller facilities, not all as big as, like I say, the ones in America. But the Russians did build one that could handle 60,000 people underground. And again, the timing was all targeting towards, in their case, it was 2013. I started snooping around and found out that the Chinese had also started converting thousands. This is interesting because I didn't know this Chinese history like I know it now. But many years ago, they had progressively, there was thousands of underground tunnels that had been created by the Chinese during their own history. They were created as hideouts and storage and military training centers for secrecy under the ground, into the mountainsides and what have you. So they simply, in most of their cases, they converted and upgraded some of these thousands of underground facilities. So now here we have Russia's got them, the United States has them, and the Chinese have them. And in the China's case, they also have hidden away all sorts of things, like entire battleship fleets, entire major aircraft, numbers of aircraft, but also as many as 3,000 major intercontinental ballistic missiles as well, underneath, inside some of their facilities. Now, in the United States, I found out we had taken NORAD, which of course had been the Cheyenne Mountain underground facility for so many years. That had been utilized, of course, as the military watchdog for us to keep track of any potential invasion of a major country for so many years. They had actually removed everything out of NORAD and converted that into a very well-shielded underground hideout, like we're talking about, for the very elite few that are going to be given tickets to get in underground when the time comes. And when I started looking into Nibiru, the history on it of course was amazing, because it's been out there and predominantly thought of as kind of almost a mythical situation. They had written it up very seriously in like Life magazine and Reader's Digest in about the 1959 to 63 period of time, and they had said that it had been found, but that in a worst-case situation, we probably didn't have to worry about it for about 50 years. And apparently that was fairly accurate. And also, it was obviously put on the back burner for everybody, saying, well, we don't have to worry about it for 50, 60 years. I'm not even going to be around, so let's not even be concerned with it. But all of a sudden now, again, it appears that it was around 1983 when a report came in and was handed to Ronald Reagan, and he was told, this thing is coming back and it is real, and we're doing studies on it now, and if in fact it comes back, it's going to wreak havoc on the world. And for those people that are old enough to remember, that was approximately when Ronald Reagan stepped forward on the floor of the United Nations and made this historic speech where he said, in fact, I wonder how well we would get along with our enemies here on Earth if we all realized we mutually had some type of an extraterrestrial problem heading towards us from outer space. Everybody made the assumption that he was talking about aliens, which of course he may be, but mixed in with this mess. But basically, that was about the same time when, in fact, Nibiru was pretty much verified to be on its way back in. And I believe that was actually the top thing that he was talking about in that strange speech. So,
Bob,
yes,
Bob, let me interrupt you just for a minute.
Sir, please.
You remember, too, at the time, and because this is critical, just as on my website I've cataloged the dead scientists over the last 23 years of being on talk radio. Do you remember when the leading scientists, astronomers, were being whacked, murdered, accidentally, often, and when I say accidentally, that's cynicism.
Certainly.
Absolutely. So can you just address that, too? Because, I mean,
sure.
This is so unique, the fact that at the time that Nibiru, the 10th planet, Gabriel's fist, Lucifer's hammer, it had all the colloquial names associated with it, and historically the ancients knew about it. Planet X is the 10th planet. What were some of your sources telling you about, we're talking serious guys getting waxed?
Oh, sure. And in a lot of them, as a matter of fact, that the assumption was that a lot of them were being whacked for other reasons. And now what I mean by that is the scientists As a matter of fact, one of the worst was, I believe it was, now I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head exactly, but it was something like 12 or 18 guys that actually were involved with the astronomical studies, were at a big convention in Switzerland or someplace, and they all got on one of those gondolas that goes across the Swiss Alps there, you know, that wonderful vacation thing. And it fell, one of them fell to the ground and took out about 12 or 18 of the top guys that were really involved with that study at that point in time. That would be the, I mean, that was great for whoever was set out to, they refer to them as mechanics that were put together to eliminate some of the people that were being too talkative. Anybody that might have been potentially in line where they either had a lot of the good information and may be morally inclined to let people know what was going on, those people were being bumped off in large quantities. But additionally, which I mentioned, by the way, I have the new DVD that I just got, now it's finished and is available for anybody through my website. It's called Incoming. That includes the background history on some of what we're talking about right now. See, another person that falls into that category, believe it or not, would have been the Princess Diana. See, Princess Diana would be one of the people at the very highest level, sitting in the dining room of the Queen, if you will, and would have been totally aware of what was forthcoming, and also one of the people, the few people that had more morals than political ties, and of course she had that extraordinary strange accident with her car that either blew up and or flipped over and rolled over in the middle of the tunnel in France. And, of course, that always was left in the air, and et cetera, et cetera. Another person was Bill Colby. Bill Colby was a former head of the CIA. He had been retired, but he also would have known all of this and was supposed to be going back before a congressional inquiry himself within a week or two, something like that. And he was murdered. There's no question about it. It was a professional hit. He was found, said to have fallen out of his canoe in front of his house in a lake that he had his home in front of. The only thing was that they didn't get into too much was the fact that for some reason he had interrupted having a clam dinner that and a $75 bottle of wine on his table, and all of those things were like not even half completed, and apparently he got this mystical urge to jump into his canoe and go out and fall out of it and drowned. So
hey,
he
Bob,
was hit. Yes,
Bob,
sir.
Let me just interrupt something there, because one of the people that's one of the sleaziest characters I've ever met in my life, he's dead now. Tex said point blank, Colby was called out, and he was held underwater by a couple divers. In other words, sure, the divers had been pre-positioned, so, you know, the sleazy individual, who I'll just call him Tex, said that Colby was called out, and obviously, if you remember, too, that all of the talk about him mysteriously drowning, well, that was all BS, but I want you, too, if you don't mind, to deal with Eugene Shoemaker, the famous Shoemaker-Levy. You know, he's on a road 310 miles north of Alice Springs in Central Australia, and he has a two-car collision. So somebody whacked Shoemaker. He's probably one of the most famous ones. Brian Marsden. We're talking, and people have seen on YouTube, and I'm going to put this link up. By the way, I've linked everybody on my front webpage while Bob is talking about these underground bunkers. He's done an exquisite job of photographs and telling it like it is. But one of the most interesting ones was Rodney March. You remember the guy in the Antarctic back around 2000? He was an Australian astrophysicist, and he died under mysterious circumstances, and that's why they were down there. in Antarctica when Nibiru, Planet X, could be seen from the southern hemisphere. If you take the deaths, I'm going to turn right back over to you, Bob, of all the scientists, actually astrophysicists, astronomers, if you take them all, they all happened in the southern hemisphere. The two most famous ones were at the Atacama telescope, up in Chile. And let me just give this to you and then take it. Astronomer Koichiro Morita and Stephen Rawlings, they're both murdered, and they're all in the southern hemisphere. Now, that's pretty amazing that these gentlemen are all taken out. They're all in the southern hemisphere. It's all over pretty much a 10-year, or actually it's concurrent with what you're describing to the listeners is happening. I mean, right. I know you and I we did a show together years ago on that, but I mean, bring it right up now. We've got the same thing happening again. We've got astronomers and astrophysicists dying.
And also, again, which were the people that I was kind of specifying that I did cover in the DVD is some of these other the powerhouse political people that themselves were bad guys. But see, like Bill Casey, he was another one. Now that was in the middle of back in the. See again, now we're talking. My information was that. The serious heads up was about 1983. Okay, Bill Casey, a couple of years later, he was about to go once again before, and he was a CIA chief, all right, the head of the CIA, and during the Reagan-Bush administration, and he had kept his mouth quiet and shut, and he had made a statement. As a matter of fact. As you know, and we're not going to mention any names, but a lady friend of mine back in D.C., you had talked to her a couple of times. If you'll, again, I don't want to get into names at all.
Yeah, I never talk about names on the radio.
All right, but you know who I'm referring to? Okay.
Yes.
And she actually had been with Bill Casey for many years, even wrote his speeches. That's how close she was. And her and I were extraordinarily close. And by the way, she's still with us, thank goodness. And she's older than me, so that makes her older than dirt, as they used to say. Anyhow,
well, then we're both in the sandbox because we're both getting in that realm.
That's right. And anyhow, Bill Casey had told someone he was called back one more time to go before for a congressional inquiry, and he had told somebody. He said. I'm tired of the whole thing, and I'm just going to let everybody know what's really coming in. And that was a quote, and that either the following day, I believe it was, he came in, had his regular cup of coffee, and put his nose down in the cup, and that was the end of it. And they took him away and gave him a lobotomy at the hospital. Anyhow, within 2 days he was dead anyhow. But they gave him lobotomy so he couldn't even talk to anybody at the hospital. And then, of course...
Hey, Bob?
Yes,
one of the interesting things about that, and again, ladies and gentlemen, I want to give Bob the maximum amount of time, but what's critical, the reason they gave him a lobotomy was simply to cover up the fact, and this was by Bill Casey's right-hand man, the guy that they wrote the book, The Secret Man about, Frank, and I can't remember his name, but I interviewed him for 3 times, and he said they put a plutonium needle in Bill Casey's sun visor in his car, and they wanted to cover up the intense radioactivity burns on his brain. And that was from the guy. And by the way, I think he is now a bodyguard for a famous Hollywood producer. Very tough man, and I can't think of his name. If someone wants to send me an email. But saying that, Bill Casey and just one more guy that we got to bring up really quick, Dr. Robert Harrington. I mean, one of the guys that was the leading and most outspoken man talking about Planet X, he gets whacked too because he headed to New Zealand. And the point being is that when you were doing your investigations and all of these events were coalescing, I mean, in essence, they were trying to cover up Planet X And in those days, I was interviewing guys who are, well placed, and they were calling it Gabriel's fist. Obviously, there had been a book written about Lucifer's hammer, but you cannot separate the depth. And these aren't minor guys with little telescopes. These are the most famous who's who in the world of astrophysics.
And when you're talking, and I, by the way, I cover Robert Harrington, cover all of this in my DVDs. The Robert Harrington was the head of the United States Naval Observatory, and had for several years been feeling and believing that there was this huge body out there with the potential of coming back in. He had heard, again, all of the other miscellaneous stuff, and he actually ended up sitting down with, and it was, fortunately, it is on a video, he finally sat down with a Dr. Sitchin, who, of course, was the linguistics expert who read the Sumerian clay tablets and had translated those tablets, and we're talking thousands of 4,000-year-old clay tablets that, in fact, described the planet X coming back around. And he finally got the phone call that he always wanted, and that was from somebody of some credible astronomical skills, and it was Robert Harrington. And Harrington had sat down with him. They recorded their meeting, and Harrington told Sitchin in his face and on camera, he said, "You have been right all along. I have found Planet X, the 10th planet. It is out there, and people, and I can," and he said, "I know where it is. I can pinpoint it at this point in time." And by the way, this is a long time. This is back in the 90s. And it was a short time after that when Robert Harrington died of what I call one of these instant cancers. He got feeling ill, had not even finished his formal report that he was working on Planet X. He became feeling ill, short time later hospitalized, and then a short time later he was deceased. It was almost the same cancer that Ruby, the fellow that had assassinated Oswald in front of everybody's face, Ruby died of almost the same cancer, where he was feeling ill 1 week while he was in jail for killing Oswald, and trying to talk to everybody and blow the whistle on stuff, and which they were keeping that quiet. But anyhow, he also came down with that instant cancer, where he's not feeling too bad one day, and within a week or 10 days, he can't be talking to anybody, and then he's gone. So anyhow, that was another one. But Harrington was in fact the head of the Naval Observatory for the U.S. government. See, so that was a guy there that had found it, and they certainly couldn't have him making an official worldwide report that this thing was coming back and that he had found it. Of course, he didn't know when it was coming back, but he had actually physically located it. And being the position he was in, the U.S. government couldn't say, "Oh, that guy's a jerk," or he drinks too much wine or smoking the drapes or something. They couldn't do that kind of a number on him, so he had to come down with something, and they eliminated him real fast with this instant cancer, as I call it. Additionally,
again, the plutonium, whether it's plutonium, polonium takes a little longer. By the way, the name of the guy was Frank Dukes, okay? And
yes,
he wrote a book, and I'm sorry, I interviewed him, I think, a half a dozen times. And thank you, Randy S., for letting me know that. We're talking 15 years ago, but right now, I think here's a secondary title for this show tonight. Their bones cry out from the grave. They were all who's who. They were all preeminent. They were all specialists. They were all, if you will, you couldn't have more respect in the astronomical community. And so the point is, ladies and gentlemen, this thing has ramifications. And I, Bob, just so you know, I put up a link to your website, as Bob is talking. I'm putting up links. Number one, to his website, so you can go and see the amazing underground bunker stuff, and then to the dead scientists, and just as you start to, especially dead astrophysicists, astronomers, this is why we have become, we are a bloody, I'm just throwing this in, we are a bloody nation. The truth must be killed, the truth must be quashed. And Bob, will you just, because I want to know this, I forgot, when did you get hit with that weapon that pretty well whacked you out for a number of years? What year was that?
Well, as a matter of fact, there's been 3 attempts to take me out. One was a vehicle that physically drove through my wall, a glass wall, sliding glass door, actually, in Florida. And that was way back in '87 when I was literally, I was still, and that was at my point of employment. And at that time, I was involved with the Iran-Contra stuff and very, very serious heavy duty, dealing directly with Senator Kerry at that time, the Secretary of State today. Not, whatever, and I'm putting a judgment on him, but he was doing serious inquiries at that time. So that was the first time there was a serious hit. This guy literally, his vehicle went through my wall, a sliding glass wall, actually, and got hung up on a planter. This was in Florida. Got hung up on a planter, and his front of his station wagon, it was like 17 feet long, fell about 8 inches in front of my desk is where it got hung up and stopped, literally. So it was only by grace of God that I made it out of that one. Then there was another attempt. There was another attempt, and there was also a setup to throw me out of the window of about a 17th floor building, a hotel room in Orlando, when I was to be interviewed by the 2 investigators for the Iran-Contra business back then. And I surprised them by showing up with my lawyer. So, and by doing that, it messed them up because they did not even have a piece of paper or a recording device with them. The intent was to have me exit one of the windows at this hotel. There's no question about it. Anyhow, in 1996 or 7, I'm not positive, I was asleep. I was sound asleep in my bedroom in Los Angeles, California at that time, and I went into a grand mal seizure, and just laying completely sound asleep on my back. My wife jumped up, called the ambulance, which was rather quick, fortunately, because the seizure maintained up to the very moment that you could hear the sirens, the police, and the ambulance coming up my street. And then it stopped. And the bottom line is, after doing a lot of inquiry, et cetera, what had taken place was I had been hit with a microwave weapon. And I wouldn't have believed it until later on. The doctors kind of almost verified it. And even, believe it or not, some writings out of Tesla's own experimentation. What had happened was I had been hit with a microwave from our ground floor where we were. I was right about 18 inches away. To my right was large glass doors that we utilize in Florida and Orlando and over in Los Angeles. And someone had broken down a piece of the fence, a wooden security fence in our garden on the outside, had broken it down inward, and that was where they had been approximately 15 to 20 feet from the window. And I had, this weapon had killed another fella in the identical manner about a week after he did the Conspiracy Theory show, an interview with, what's his name, the fellow that does the...
Jesse Ventura?
Jesse Ventura's program. Jesse had, he was talking about weapons, this fellow was talking about particle beam weapons, etc., to Jesse, and about a week after they had filmed it, he was in his kitchen, standing at the window, fell down into a grand mal seizure, and his heart basically exploded during the seizure, and of course he died. And that was literally like 2 weeks after they finished the filming. Coincidentally, I was working on one of my investigative DVDs at that time. Actually, I guess it was VHS back then, but relative to weapons also, which I thought was interesting. But what this is the microwave affects your brain and put me into this convulsion. But what the downside of it was this, and it's physically described in Nikola Tesla's own paperwork, which is amazing. And he said that if you apply this voltage in this particular wave form, when it exits the mass of your arm bone, shoulder ball of your bone of your arm or your elbow, it will explode the bone. And that was exactly what happened. Once I recovered, was taken to the hospital. Of course, they tested me. There was no reason for me to have had that seizure. It didn't show up any reason at all. And but the big deal was it literally blew my left shoulder ball of my arm, completely blew it into small pieces. And the description, with no external marks whatsoever. The description that was given to me with the first surgeon that looked at it was, what in the world happened to you? It looks like a bomb went off in the middle of your shoulder. How did that happen?
And Bob, let me interrupt you. At the same time that happened to you, I was interviewing a lot of people. Now, again, I can validate this stuff. People say, yeah, sure. At the same time that this happened to Bob, and I think within a period of time after that, we were on a radio show together, and I got a briefing from somebody in the, let's just say this, every day is Halloween world, that, you had been hit with a shockwave weapon. And a shockwave weapon, it fits the bill of exactly what you described. It's actually, if you will, a resonating waveform that literally, fractures everything. It's kind of like if you were letting a bomb, even a firecracker, I'm trying to make this really simplistic, hang in space. That's what happened inside you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to validate something. Bob's on my radio program. Obviously we talked about this. The point is that they tried to kill him, and I would be the first to tell you, and I've always told you this, you're alive by the grace of God, period. There is no way most people can come out of that.
Exactly what happened was that the seizure problem stopped, just boom, like it was switched off, as soon as the ambulance was within earshot. Whoever was doing it was right there, and then click, switched it off, and got on out of the way. Whatever, took off for parts unknown, literally at that time. And the description, amazingly, literally was written, which I found out about a year later, was written in paperwork relative to a demonstration that Nikola Tesla was doing for students at one of the colleges or universities, with doing some of his crazy electronic stuff he did, where he would actually shoot himself with these things, what have you. And he described it verbatim. He said, if you did this and you did that, the closest mass of the bone that it would go through, it would totally blow it into little pieces. All right, now, as far as my condition, this has now been 17 years since that event. My shoulder, the replacement they put in it was no good whatsoever, and I've not had the use of my left arm. It's totally hanging free, disconnected from my body. So I knew you would ask that earlier. I think somebody had asked my condition on that. That's my status. Technically, I'm considered to be 100% disabled. I am without the use of the arm, and I am in pain 24 hours a day for 17 years. But anyhow, and I don't talk about this very much at all.
Well, no, and I think, yeah. Look, let me say this: you paid a price to try and warn people, and you've been on the top, you've been on the cutting edge, you've been in the middle of. I don't think there's any place you haven't been. And now, lady, the reason I asked you to tell that story, okay, is because after being on talk radio for 23 years. I've become jaded in some areas, okay? And one of the things that I'm jaded in is the fact that there seems to be a total disconnect from the death of all these people or the bioscientists and the release of bioweapons. The fact that the largest amount of money in the world is going to literally prepare the bureaucrats. By the way, that's happening in Russia, and there's been very few people who have ever been from the West inside Yamanato Mountain. That's the equivalent of what you were describing of how huge some of our underground bases.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
so
that's the big one.
Yep, Yamanato. It's so big, ladies and gentlemen, you can fly airplanes in it. That's how big it is. So, Bob, as we are now, okay, and I want people to get this DVD because not a day goes by that people don't ask about Nibiru. The reason I haven't dealt with it is because, number one, my focus has been on other things, and I'm not going to, number one, you're the guy that's done it. And why should I try and do what you've already done and done so remarkably well? And everybody's got to, play their part. But tell me right at this moment, and we've got the next hour. Now you only want to stay on for 2 hours, and only feel you can stay on for 2 hours, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll be glad to get back as soon as it makes sense for you guys too. But right. I just underwent a small surgery. Okay. And as a matter of fact, let me add this to that. Because of that event, that started a chain of other things. I've had blood clot problems, and I have had since we spoke. You're not aware of this, as a matter of fact. I know that I've had 3 heart attacks. I've had a stroke, which was a lung embolism, and I have to be treated on that on an ongoing basis. And a small amount of surgery is very frightening. I almost bled out about 1 year ago with a small injury. So I'm like walking on thin ice all the time, and I realize it. So I try to be careful. That's the only reason I'm not doing an extra hour or two tonight is because I just recovered from surgery that I had.
Sure, and I understand that. So if I'm rushing you, I want to get to the... Yeah, and I don't mean to, but this is such an incredible show, and I just got an email from one of my friends who's an incredible intercessor prayer warrior, and just saying, this is a heads up that everyone should be praying for you, because look, you've been on the front lines, and you know what I always get a kick out of is people who've never even recognized there's a war always seem to know more, and what's fascinating to me about this is that the reason why Nibiru is now in plain sight, and it is, I've put posters or pictures on I shoot a lot of backlit stuff. I'm shooting into the sun, good lenses. I know the difference between lens flare and a secondary body, and the point being, we are seeing, even, if you will, pyramids, almost the pyramidal shape over the sun. I've been a 43-year I've been a photographer for 43 years. So saying all that, what is right now your most current information on Nibiru? And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to go to BobFletcherInvestigations.com, because there's a lot of stuff out there. Go ahead and spend your life on search engines, but Bob has put it all together, and from experience. And not only from experience, but when I have him share his life story with you, and as it relates to his investigation, and those who have wanted to take his life out of his story, as in kill him, murder him, assassinate him, I think it puts you into the realm of this is real. This isn't the horse manure, typical mudslinging, don't get it morons, I'm sorry to use the word, but this is real. So, Bob, where are we right now? Because we can take we'll do a break in 8 minutes at the top of the hour, but the point is, where are we right now? Because people can get your DVD, see everything. Where are your most recent information?
Okay.
What are you being told?
One person that I consider to be really pretty accurate on this. All right, he's been doing it for a long time. He's an astronomer per se. He's at 120,000 hours or something like that behind a telescope. And I don't pretend to be an astronomer. Again, I put together the best information from the best places and best direction, and that's what I've tried to do. My expertise is criminals out of Washington, but when it all fits together, it fits together. It appears that Nibiru, the people ask, when is it going to hit? When's it going to? It's not going to hit us, as a matter of fact, but it's going to pass close by. The best educated analysis on it at this time is, at the very earliest potential is that it should be seen in the December of not this December, but potentially the earliest would be next December, and that it would take a couple of months after being first seen to pass close by, and that could fall someplace in the middle of March, the following March. Okay, so you got December, where it'll be visually, potentially started to be seen as a star, all right, as a single star, and will start getting bigger and bigger as it moves closer to go around the sun and then head back out again. And all of everything, studying astronomy, studying the historic ancient writings, studying the Bible, studying all of the other ancient documentation of actually when this was seen before and logged in, all right, the last time that it came around. All of that, everything, doing the math, the changes, the variations on calendar, types of calendars and all of that. The closest possible time is not this coming March, but 1 year from this March. We're talking about 400-some days or whatever it would be from today.
Right. Now, what about the effects? Now, we're already seeing the effects.
Excuse me. All right. The effects, yes. First off, we are already feeling the effects. And by the way, almost everything I'm telling you here is graphically put together in the DVD, which is a double DVD. It's 2 discs, and I tried to cover it so that every legitimate question could be approached, and that's what we tried to do in it. And again, like you said, I even have some live footage of the underground facilities. I have all the figures of what they spent and all kinds of things that are way above the Call of Duty, so to speak. The effects, here's where we're at right now. The crazy weather that we just participated in, and it will be terrible this whole winter. This whole winter is going to make people crazy. I will tell you that much. The weather from this point forward, actually going back about 6 months, starting 6 months ago, the weather on the globe will never be like it ever was in your lifetime. You're going to see weather changes and variations and extremes that just never have existed since we've been keeping records. All right, that was put into the DVD before last month's crazy, or last week's almost, that weather that came in where we had the frost going all the way down to New Orleans, the freezing and all of that extraordinary snow, and 20 feet in Buffalo, New York, et cetera, et cetera. All right, that was in my DVD before last week, obviously. Here's what's taking place already. First off, now this is scientific material here, folks. This is stuff where you can look this up. Absolutely look this up. The planets have been heating up, starting out by Pluto and coming inward. All of the surfaces have been changing. They have been heating up, for one thing. They have had storms on the face of the planets that they have never seen before, ever, since records were keeping. Now, we're talking the heating and the jiggling, the wiggling, if you will, in their orbits of all of the planets starting out by Pluto and coming inward. Now, a lot of this stuff is really being it's out there. You can find it. You have to look it up a little bit with some specifics. But this stuff has been kind of kept quiet. It's just like everything else, Another thing is, as we speak, the volcanic activity, volcanoes, have started up. A couple of weeks ago, we had 45 volcanoes going off simultaneously in the globe, around the globe. We're having earthquake and movement that we've never had before. They had a crack that just plain opened up down in Texas, near Mexican border, about 2-3 months ago, whenever it was. These things are all part to the moving in of Nibiru. We have an increase in the meteor, comet, falling star, shooting star activity, et cetera, because here's what's happening. Nibiru is headed back in. It has a size mass estimated to be 5 times that of the Earth. You could put 5 Earths on the diameter across the face of Nibiru. It has 5 moons traveling with it. It also apparently has a lot of iron oxide, and that iron oxide, as it passes close to other planetary bodies, etc., it drags it off, and there's where the winged planet comes from. Some of the older pictures and drawings, you can go to all these ancient, even on the walls of caves, for crying out loud, they have paintings of when it had passed by, and it looked like, quote-unquote, the winged planet. This is iron oxide that is blowing off of this, if you will, on both sides as it plunges back to come around the sun. When it finally gets here, we will have Noah's waves again, the flooding of Noah. We also have here on the Earth already, we're having much more melting underneath, like an internal activity underneath many glaciers. They're melting. Now, people say, oh, well, so what? That's some of that global warming stuff and blah, blah, blah. Down in Miami, every high tide, as we speak today, every high tide is coming in 4 to 6 blocks into Miami Beach City proper. Every high tide. The city of Miami Beach had to get special funding. They spent multi-millions 90 days ago, or whenever it was, maybe 6 months ago at this time, to put pumps into the city of Miami Beach because of the high tides now moving beyond the beach all the way into the cities and trying to keep it from flooding out every hotel along Miami Beach. As we speak, all these things are going on, but unless you put them all together, individually they don't mean very much. The animals...
Bob?
Yes.
Yeah, Bob, hold on for the second hour for that so we can take a break. And if you want to take a break, what, Doug, are they 3-minute breaks or...
Yeah, 3 to 4 minutes, and
okay.
That'll give you a chance to get a glass of water. Folks, you're listening to a very special edition of the Hagman Report. Mr. Steve Quayle and Mr. Bob Fletcher, Bob Fletcher Investigations, linked off of stevequayle.com as well as Hagman and Hagman.com. Folks, we're going to break back after this. Stay with us.